When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Yes, here I am, the host of Join Up Dots, and yeah, I'm in the back garden just by the swing to the left-hand side of the trampoline to give you bearings of where I'm sitting today. And I've got a guest today who really has got a story which is amazing, so let's cut to the chase and introduce him. Our guest today is the author of 3 Simple Steps, a masterclass publication that can show the majority of people how to escape their present situation and reclaim their future. And the author certainly knows a thing or two about reclaiming his. He openly admits he was not afforded the most luxurious of upbringings, in fact, being born into a life of poverty. But he always had an inherent knack for seeing an opportunity to make money and therefore change his situation. Whether it was selling sweets or candy to his classmates on the school bus or developing multi-million-pound businesses on a shoestring, his fingers crossed many areas of business with apparent ease. His successes have been frequent and financially lucrative, leading him to a life that many would say was a dream existence. But he's so much more than a wealthy businessman enjoying a life of hard-earned luxuries. His belief that life should not be a struggle and is one that should be enjoyed has been one that, unfortunately, he's been unable to deliver to countless people he has encountered over the years. People who are trapped, unable to realise the dreams that they hold in their hearts. So with an audience waiting to hear how they too can achieve a future they deserve, I'd like to introduce to the show the one and only Trevor Blake. How are you today, Mr. Blake?
I'm fine, thanks, David. Thanks for that introduction.
Your life has, it's a kind of rags to riches, but with hard work. It hasn't been an easy path in any shape or form, but you certainly have gone from polar opposites, haven't you?
I mean, yes, I grew up in what I suppose today we'd call inner city Liverpool, and then we were evicted for the third time in my first 7 years of life to North Wales, and I grew up in a derelict farmhouse in North Wales from about the age of 8 through to when I left and joined the Royal Navy at 17 or 18. So, it's not the hardest of starts, but it's not the easiest either, I guess, is how I view it. And I just decided I didn't want the sort of life that was mapped out for me at that time. I wanted something different. My choices at 18 were probably to work on a farm or work in the Forestry Commission. In fact, I was offered, the school counsellor said that I should go and work in the local chicken packing factory where there was an apprenticeship. But I wanted a little bit more for my life than that. I wanted to travel. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to, see what life had to offer. So I found a way to get out of that trap. And I've had an amazing life of adventure and what other people would describe as the American dream as well.
Whenever you're sitting there having a roast dinner and it's a bit of chicken, do you sort of think, oh, how my life could have been different?
Funny you should say that. I think that every single time I see a chicken, I still think of it. And I still have that woman's voice in my head. She looked down her nose at me and that was it for me. She looked me up and down and thought, okay, this is the best this lad's ever going to do. And I think also I still see the image of her face, and I think that's always a source of motivation for me.
Yeah, it is funny how so many of our childhood memories should be positive because, it's a time of our life where we should be free, we should be running around, we should just be having no responsibilities. But a lot of them, when we look back, certainly from my point of view, the teachers, they weren't supportive at all. Many of them were lunatics, to be honest, and who would throw bald rubbers in big clouds of smoke and whatever, and really shouldn't have been teachers. Do you think that woman, when you look back on her, was actually a good thing to have? When you look back on her, was it a positive dot in your life that if she had said something different, your life possibly wouldn't have gone the way it has?
I think so, but also I think it's how we observe those situations. I'm a great believer in, well, actually, I'm not a believer in positive thinking, but I'm a great believer in positive reaction. And I think it's how we react to situations that makes the difference. And some people in that situation could crumble, or some people could do as they're told. And my reaction, probably born out of some arrogance that came from I don't know where, just said, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. And that's what I put in my head. And, for a lot of my business life, whenever I started a business, nobody around me has said, oh, good idea. Here's some money. Most people have said, you're crazy. You're not qualified. You'll never pull this off. And it's been a journey of proving people wrong, really.
So you're just a sort of bloody-minded individual, are you?
Yeah. I've been called other things too, but yes.
Because I'm the same.
Belligerent, I think.
Yeah.
I think belligerent is the most common used phrase for me.
If somebody says to me, you can't do that, that's red rag to a bull for me. And even if I've got no idea how to do it, just so that I can go back and go, told you so. And I don't know if it's a good trait to have, really, but it's something that I've always had, and I've always wanted to push myself just to prove other people wrong.
Well, I wish this was video, not audio, because I could show you. I'm sat at my desk, and on the wall opposite me is a ceramic tile that I bought in Cornwall back in about 1992. Actually, my wife bought it for me and wrapped it up, and it says "Told you so," but there wasn't enough room for the full word, so it's actually TOLDUSO, and it has a dolphin on the top. And I was feeling particularly down because things weren't going the way I thought they were going to go for my life. I was 30, and things hadn't quite gone. I thought at 30 I would have made it already. And she bought this ceramic tile and she wrapped it up and she says, "I'll give you this when you're 50 years old and you're a multimillionaire." And it's traveled all over the world with us, never been unwrapped until I turned 50, which was a couple of years ago. And I had, at that time, I retired at 49, so I was sort of semi-retired at 50 because I've been doing other projects since then. And, it was just a great feeling to see. I'd almost forgotten about it, and I wish I could show it to you, actually.
So if you go right back to inner city Liverpool, what was your life like then? Because I know Liverpool and I know it quite well, and there's some sort of well-to-do areas of it, and there's some that are still quite hard living areas, certainly around the Anfield area, the football ground. So what was your childhood like?
Well, where I grew up doesn't exist anymore. Everything was bulldozed and turned into a grain terminal. It was in Crosby. Crosby's can be quite posh, but it also has some pretty rough areas. So my first house, or the first house I lived in there, was a 3-story old captain's house, and my dad lost his job yet again, and we couldn't afford the rent, so we were evicted from that. And then we lived in a shop, or just above a shop, and there was a row of sort of consumable shops, and my dad had the bright idea of turning the shop into a furniture kind of store, which no one would buy furniture in a place like that. So that also failed. So we got evicted from that furniture shop. My memories are always nostalgic now. So I remember good times and happy times, and I consider myself Liverpoolian, even though we moved out of Liverpool at a young age, and I'm a big Liverpool fan. My wife used to be a season ticket holder there, whenever we get back, that's the first thing we go and do. But it was a life in playing in the streets, and it was rough. And I one of my abiding memories is walking along and hearing somebody was cycling past me, and they spoke very clearly. They said yes, and I realized I'd never said the word yes. I'd always say yeah as a kid, and I suddenly realized that there's another world outside of the world that I was living. So I know if I'd stayed in that environment, my life would have turned out quite differently. But like everything, fortune sometimes comes out of adversity, and so we literally, under the cover of darkness, packed the back of our Bedford van and went for the hills in those days. So we drove out to North Wales, and the van broke down, and then a farmer towed us to this derelict farmhouse, and there we stayed. He said we could stay a week, and we stayed there for the rest of our days, really. But what made it particularly tough, I think, at that time was not long after we moved into that derelict farmhouse, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was given 6 months to live. And it was a terrible shock to little kids at the time.
Yeah.
But I remember that was the first time I saw what unshakable belief looks like in someone's eyes, because I was there when she told the doctor that was not good enough. She needed more than 6 months. And I was also there when I saw her looking out of the kitchen window and pointing at the sky and saying, I'll come when I'm good and ready, and I'm not coming until my children are grown up and safe, and I'll make that decision. I mean, so that's where I get a lot of my belligerence and determination from in my business life, is from watching how my mother fought against cancer for the next 14 years. And she saw her dream achieved. Her dream was to, pull off the difficult task of being a good mother for 3 children in difficult circumstances and see them all safely leave the home and be normal and get decent jobs, which is what happened.
And have you got children yourself, Trevor?
No, my wife and I are a couple who tried for 7 years to have children and it didn't work out. But my wife was born with a heart condition, and that's always sort of plagued her from that aspect. So we tried our hardest, but no, it didn't work out for us.
Because the reason I was asking that, I was wondering, if you did have children, would there be like would you want to recreate that nostalgia of your own childhood? Because certainly where I am at the moment, I've got 5 kids. Some of them are sort of grown up now and sort of moved out. But I remember growing up in the 70s when I used to just sort of run riot, really, and go up the woods and play in the park and on the fields. And it was always, when do we need to come home? Oh, when it's dark or when it's tea time. And that was it. You just sort of went off. And my kids now, it just seems, well, I had an argument with my wife tonight when my son had to just walk round the corner and he's 12 and she was saying, no, we've got to walk him around. And I was going, it's 12 years old, for God's sake, what's going to happen? Oh, you don't know what's going to happen. And I've become very nostalgic for my childhood. So would you kind of like your kids to have the life that you've got now, or do you think that it is good to have a life like you had so you can see the contrast?
I think it's great to have the contrast, to be honest with you. Being in America, everybody lives in a car, basically. Nobody walks anywhere. And the consequences of that can be easily seen whenever you see the average-sized American. It's unfortunate. It's part of the sedentary lifestyle of being in America. My neighbors, I have a home here. My neighbor is about half a mile away, and I have 2 horses, and the girls come to play with the horses, which is really nice. But they drive here. They could climb over the fence and walk. It would take them 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But they get in the car, which is a big effort, and they drive around, and then they play with the horses. It's just a different culture and mentality these days, I think. But it's one thing that I try to encourage in 3 Simple Steps is getting back into nature, immersing in nature, because I know I would not have had the life that I've enjoyed if I didn't have the connection I have with through nature with the world. It's a very important thing. So I immerse myself in nature all the time. I have 2 dogs, 2 horses, and I'm out walking, and I'm lucky enough to have some woods around the house. So I walk in the woods trails as often as I can. And I can't imagine life any other way, but I think it's because I started off in inner city Liverpool and then was sort of exposed to what was almost like the Chronicles of Narnia in North Wales. And that contrast was so dramatic that I could never go back. We had no locks on our doors, so we just opened the front door and off I'd go first thing in the morning when I was at a weekend or on school holiday. And like you say, I wouldn't come back until the depths of the night, and nobody worried about it in those days. No
one cared at all, and you didn't have a mobile phone, you just cleared off.
Yeah, nobody worried at all. I'd come back, and sometimes I'd be late for tea and I'd get in trouble for being late. But other than that, there was never any other concern.
No, it's madness how it's changed. I don't know why it's changed, but it has. Looking at your, the reason why I wanted you so much on this show is the theme of the show is to inspire people that they can have the life that they want. Whether they're in a job that they don't like, they're in a situation that they don't like, they have got the choices to take control themselves. And I was very taken with your, I suppose, strapline. Our lives are not meant to be a struggle, but a joyful trip. Have you always believed that, or have you become sort of more joyful as you've become wealthier?
No, I've always enjoyed that, and I've never pursued wealth. It's always been a side effect of doing something with purpose, I believe. So 3 Simple Steps is all about how you build that map to get from where you are to where you would really like to go. And most people who've not encountered the 3 Simple Steps would say, oh yes, but you've got to fail 100 times before you can succeed. I've never done that. I've never found that to be something to do at all. I've built 4 companies. Each one of them has been a success by whichever matrix you want to judge it by. And, I do think life is meant to be a joy. But unfortunately, we let into our brains other people's opinions of our abilities and the media's opinions of the world that we live in and our interaction with the world. And when we pay attention to that too much, it tends to change the way we make our decisions. And that's where it all gets screwed up. So, one of my mantras is to be very selective about what you allow into your brain. Because if you're watching the TV news headlines, it's always sensationalist, it's always negative, and it tells you that the sky is falling. And then you're in a queue for a Starbucks coffee or something like that, and you talk to the guy behind you, and he's got a great job offer. You're unlikely to make the change because you think the sky is falling.
Yeah.
So I believe in a world that flows more freely, so that you have eyes wide open and you're able to notice opportunities that otherwise, if you've got this great cloud over your head because the world's collapsing, or your opinion that's been given to you as the world is collapsing, then you tend not to notice those opportunities. But when your eyes are wide open, there's opportunities everywhere, and that makes everything a joyful trip. So, if I had my time over again, I wouldn't change a thing.
I think that's a key point to life, really, because the news is just it just brings you down, doesn't it? You open a newspaper, it brings you down. If you go to the back pages where my team sit, it will bring me down. You know, you're all right at the moment. Liverpool are doing very well at the moment, so you're probably enjoying yourself. And I have to say, this is going out on the 1st of June 2014, so somebody might get this 5 years' time and you're in the championship or something.
I'm actually we're pinching ourselves. So I think I'm in a dream. It's been so long since Liverpool. We're in a position to, well, at this time of the year, to still be fighting for something. So I'm having a good time at the moment.
I think they're going to win it. I do think they're going to win it. But I stopped looking at the news maybe 5 years ago, and I had a moment. I was on the train and I opened this newspaper, and the first story was about a dad killing his kids, and I thought, oh, this is terrible. And I went to the next page, and it was almost the same story. And by the time I got to the third, I thought, how is this benefiting me? And I closed the newspaper up, and other than the sports pages, I haven't watched the news or anything. And I now find that generally, as you say, I'm in a kind of positive world because I know no better. And if anything major does occur, you find out about it anyway. People just tell you.
Well, you can't avoid it. You go into a restaurant or an airport, and there's, the TVs are on silent, but they've all got ticker tape going on. So you can't avoid the headlines, and that's fine. It's the sensationalist nonsense that goes with it that you have to avoid. I haven't taken a newspaper in 20 years of any description, and I don't think that it's. I think I know what's going on in the world as much as anybody does. I never watch the news. I'm very, I do follow independent journalism. I like Greg Palast and people like that. They just give an alternative view to what the media would tell you is going on in the world. And so it's all about getting the balance, between on the one hand, the propaganda that comes our way, and there's no more propaganda than you can get in America, because the news outlets are all owned by big corporations. So it's, it just, there's nothing evil about it, but you've got to be honest with yourself and say it's unlikely that they're going to tell you the whole truth if it's going to affect them.
Yeah.
So they're going to tell you their version of the truth, and you have to be aware of that. So then you have to seek out other versions, and then you can form an opinion, which finally is your own opinion, not somebody else's. I mean, I use the great example of how people's opinions are formed by the media is really the royal family, because my mother-in-law is with me right now, and she likes the royal family, but at different times, depending on what the media impression she's been given, she's against one, and then for that person, and then against another person, and for that person. And I've said to her many times, but you don't know them. And she says, but I'm entitled to my opinion. I said, but you don't know them. So how can you have an opinion? But it's not her opinion, it's the media's opinion. And the reason I can argue that is when I was in the Royal Navy, I got exposed to the royal family because I joined at the same time as Prince Andrew. And therefore, because he was there, I also got to meet the Queen Mother, the Queen, Prince Philip, and Prince Charles at the time. And so I have an opinion that's based upon my own direct observation face-to-face with these people. And it's very different to the opinions that are provided by the Saatchi & Saatchi firm, which are responsible for the royal family's PR. And so I believe my opinion is my own opinion, but I still can't get through to my mother-in-law that even though she has strong opinions, it can never be her own opinion, because all she knows is what's come through the TV or the newspaper.
I think that's absolutely true. It is absolutely true. I wonder when an opinion does. Can somebody in a cave that's got no influences from the outside world have a truly original opinion?
That's a good question. I don't know.
No, I don't know.
Well, they can have an opinion. They could have an opinion of the cave, I guess, but they would have no awareness of what's outside the cave.
I wonder if you could take somebody from a cave and actually make them more successful quicker, just because they have got no outside influences dictating those personal beliefs, as you say, that kind of brainwash you over a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, we all start the same way. We're all born with 100 billion neurons. Everyone has 100 billion neurons the day they come into the world, and they're unpolluted at that point in time. But of course, neurons behave very much. We now know that from neuroscience that the brain behaves more like a muscle than we ever realized, and it seeks out experiences. It seeks out sensationalism. It seeks out fear. It seeks out love and sex. All of these really strong emotional things. And when it finds one of them, it hooks onto it and it wants more of the same. So if the naive brain is shown something negative on its first time it comes out of the cave, if you like, and that does happen because typically our first experience has been smacked on the behind by a big hairy hand.
Yeah.
And so it's not a good start. The brain tends to then seek out all of these similar type of experiences. So I suppose if you took a naive brain and exposed it to something positive, it would then seek out, repeated positive experiences. And that would be an interesting experiment. Sounds like a German experiment, but it would be an interesting experiment that you could do with two children at the same time and see how they turned out differently.
What makes you different then, Trevor? You said that you weren't a positive thinker, but you was a believer in positive reaction. What makes you not brainwashed by negativity?
I think it's just life experiences. So, when I was in the Royal Navy, I was involved in an event that I saw firsthand. And then when I came home on leave, everybody was telling me what had happened and what it was about. And it was the complete opposite of what I had experienced. But their opinions were formed by the media. It's that experience that makes you start to see things and think things differently. And I realized that my whole family and friends and environment have been deliberately manipulated into believing a certain thing was true. And I was there and I saw firsthand, because I was, stepping over the bodies, that it wasn't true. So it's that, I think you have to have some experience like that wakes you up. And with 3 simple steps, I keep talking about the book as if I'm plugging the book, but all my proceeds go to cancer research and development. So I'm not plugging the book for the book's sake. But in 3 simple steps, I've made some points about how propaganda can affect us. And in making those points, I think it has actually woken a few people up, because I get emails from all over the world now about some of the aspects of this book. So, one of the things when people wake up, it's like a weight lifting off your shoulders, because for the first time you realize that the life you thought you had mapped out for yourself by other people or by the media or by whatever you believe the world is, that suddenly changes and you realize that your future is in your own control and not in the hands of other people. That's a very important moment. And, I get emails from all around the world. People have got the book in an airport and read it on the trip back home and then applied some of the steps, and it's that very effect occurs to them. Their life just changes dramatically from that moment forward, and they never again make decisions based upon other people's opinions of themselves or their lives. They make decisions based on their own opinions of themselves, and that's a really important time. That's when you decide you can be anything you want to be.
I'm in that time at the moment. Every morning, for the first time in my life, really, I've always been an employee, and I've always gone to work, and that's what I've done just from the age of 16 upwards. And I'm now 44, and it's just the first time in my life, as you say, I've woken up and I realise, and I don't know why it's taken me so long to realise, but I do realise now that every action that I take is my own action, and it can build to my own future. And what I'm working towards is very personal to me, but no one's going to take that away from me. And it's kind of upsets me somehow that I haven't seen that before, but I think I just wasn't ready at that time to see that.
Well, for me, I woke up fairly early, and I'm very grateful I did, but only because of what we were talking about before. People were saying, okay, your life is going to go in this direction. I didn't want that. At the same time, I was a lad from Liverpool living in Wales when Wales had a very strong movement to get the English out, because they wanted home rule for Wales, but also they were angry that a lot of English families were moving into Wales and buying up weekend property. That was putting prices up, and the locals, or the natives, for want of a better word, couldn't afford the houses. So it was at a time when you put on the TV news, and you saw people burning down holiday homes, and of course that. When kids see that on the news, teenagers see that, they reenact that anger. And so I found myself in the middle of a war, in effect, where because I was poor and I was English and from Liverpool, I was a target for the local gangs, the bullies, and it got quite severe at some points. And knives and 12-bore shotguns. I mean, I don't know that anybody would have wanted to kill me, but they would threaten me with them. And, sometimes I fought back and sometimes I ran away. And in the end, I just decided to get out of everybody's way. So I used to hide out in the public library. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me, because at the back of the library, where I knew my tormentors would never go, there was a shelf of biographies and autobiographies, and I started reading them. And I was just blown away by the lives of the successful self-made men and women in history who had been in even worse circumstances and overcome incredible adversities. People you don't often hear about, like Madam C.J. Walker, who, born to slaves, pregnant at 14, then abandoned, abused by her husband so badly that her hair fell out, at a time when she's black and female, and her conditions are completely determined by the society. She wasn't even allowed to own a knife and fork because they were considered weapons. And she went from that to being America's first female millionaire. And I was just blown away by the power of that. And that's where I got my first sort of wake up call that it doesn't have to be this way. And you don't have to listen to what people say your life is going to be like. You can make it what you want. And in all of those biographies, I started to notice the same patterns of behavior. You know, the Fords and the Carnegies and all of them, they all had the same patterns of behavior. And I thought, you know, if it worked for them, who am I to say it's not going to work for me? And so I started to apply, that's the 3 steps. I started to apply those steps in my life. And my life exploded into just an amazing adventure.
Well, we're going to come on to 3 simple steps, because I think the question that is going to be on everyone's lips is, okay, what are the 3 simple steps? When you talk about Carnegie, he was very influential in the classic book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Have you read that book?
Yes, and I do talk about it in 3 simple steps because it's snake oil.
That's right, absolutely. And they talk about 13 steps, and it's the 13 traits of the successful person, the successful man. Have you got those same traits that Andrew Carnegie had, do you think?
No, you know, when that book was published, Andrew Carnegie had been dead 17 years, so he wasn't around to be able to you know, affirm or deny what was written in that. And you know, I think you always have to be careful with self. I'm not a fan of the self-help movement, and I think positive thinking is a complete and utter illusion, because your thoughts happen so fast you can't step in front of them. And you have to, when you're looking for advice from you know, experts or the self-made men and women or some of these observers, these spectators like Napoleon Hill, you have to really check into their background. I mean, do they have the credibility to tell you how to change your life? And Napoleon Hill is a classic snake oil salesman who failed at 25 different businesses. And I think the best way to sum Napoleon Hill up is that he got married to probably a gold digger, I think. And she talked him into writing a book, and the title of the book was, you know, how to find and keep your soulmate. And that book was published the day after they got divorced. And it sort of sums up that whole genre of that time. I mean, here's a guy who never succeeded at anything, observed a lot of people who were successful, puts this plan together, and for some reason the book takes off. Now, Napoleon Hill died in poverty. He died poor, and William Clement Stone came in and bought the rights to his book back and formed a foundation so that in the future there would be this foundation. But Napoleon Hill didn't do anything to enact any of those things. So you think you've got to be really careful when you take some of this advice. You know, most self-help books are written by people whose only claim to success is the fact that the book caught on for some reason. So you have to look into the background. Did they have success first before they spoke about it? That's the key thing. And you know, with 3 simple steps, I didn't even think of writing this book until after I had sold, you know, 2 of my companies. My first company I started with $200. I sold it for $105 million. Second company I started with $200. I sold it for $300 million. That gives you the credibility at that point to stand up and say, look, this worked for me. I stole it from all these successful men and women in history. It worked for them, so just give it a go. And that's basically the whole premise of the thing.
Well, before we get to that, the theme of the actual show is loosely based around Steve Jobs' speech back in 2005 when he talks about connecting the dots. I'm going to play it now because it does seem to me that you're already highlighting some of those dots. The fact that the chicken woman at the very beginning put you on a road, then the bullies pushed you into the library when you sort of read the books and stuff. And so there seems to be a fascinating life plan that wasn't planned at all, that has led you there, which really emphasises what he says. So I'm just going to play that now, and then I'm going to ask you what you think.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
So do those words mean more to you, Trevor, than, say, the Napoleon Hill and the sort of self-help gurus out there?
Well, absolutely, because there's a man who achieved great success. It's interesting that, you know, since his death, all these experts have come out who have a claim to, you know, what it was about Steve Jobs that made him successful. And they can be fairly vindictive when they talk about his character. Again, they form their opinions based upon other books and videos and documentaries, not because they ever knew the guy. But regardless, he was incredibly successful, and therefore you have to listen to what he has to say because he has the credibility to tell you. And my life has been exactly that. You cannot possibly predict what happens in the future or how things are going to work out in the future. You can only retrospectively look at how things matched out and then use that experience to start to trust your own intuition more. For me, he used a few different words of things that you might want to trust. For me, the most important thing is to learn to trust your intuition and to develop that intuition. And Steve, one of the interesting things about all of those people who've come out of the woodwork and claim to say why Steve Jobs was successful, etc. They usually say something like, well, 95% of his life was down to micromanagement and 5% of his life was a bit weird. He used to meditate every day, but we'll forgive him for that because it didn't spoil his success. And they completely missed the point. It's the 5% that makes all the difference. The fact that he meditated every single morning is a common feature, a common behavior in every biography of every self-made man or woman that I've ever read, and also in my own life. Henry Ford used to go back to his old derelict farm, sit on his dad's old rocking chair, and just contemplate for 15 or 20 minutes every morning. He just wanted to get away from the madness, far from the madding crowd. Carnegie did exactly the same thing. Madam C.J. Walker used to sit in a tree. And when I read that when I was a kid, I thought, well, I've never meditated. I don't even know how to meditate, but I need to do something. So I used to take myself up the hills and sit under a tree for 20 minutes and do nothing but just sit there and think. And I got some wonderful ideas that have helped when I look back. I can say, okay, I can see how those dots happened because I can see when I had that idea and how I reacted to that idea and how that moved me from left to right and up and down and all the rest of it. But you still got to follow the advice and follow the behaviors of these successful people. So one of the things about Steve Jobs that I like the most is that he meditated every morning.
I do think,
and he claimed also that's where all his good ideas came from as well.
Yeah, because going back to sort of Napoleon Hill, and I take what you're saying, absolutely straight as you say it. But the thing that I got about that was the more I think about things, the more generally the answer comes up. And I never used to do that. I used to just react to hassles and tribulations and things that were going on in my life. But once I actually started to think, every morning when I'm brushing my teeth, I have a think, and sometimes I don't think anything, and then other times things just wham into my head, and I think, yes, that's what I should be doing. And since I've been doing that, it's almost like my life has become luckier, which kind of ties up to what you were saying, that it should be, it shouldn't be a struggle, it should be apparent ease. But it is. My life is nowhere near as much hassle as it used to be, and my teeth are probably better as well.
Well, and a few years ago, a family member, so we're on the same path. We have the same upbringing, same environment, same exposure, same opportunities, but we've lived very different lives. And a family member said to me in a moment of angst, well, it's all right for you. You sit on your throne on top of a hill and command the world to do your bidding. And I thought it was the best compliment anyone ever paid me, although it was never intended to be a compliment. It was intended to be an insult. And the inference was, well, you're just a lucky bugger. And it's not like that at all. It's using tools and techniques that are available to everybody to have better experiences. And so I like to take quiet time in the morning, 20 minutes every morning, same as Daniel Loeb, who's worth 4 million, and Ray Balls, who's worth 6.5 billion, Warren Buffett, who's worth I forget the last count, 60 billion or something like that. They all meditate every morning. If it works for them, who the hell am I to say it's not going to work for me? So I do those things, and that's where I get these brilliant ideas that seem to work. It's what, there's I can't remember his second name, but Vishan something or other. He's in Richard Branson's Inner Sanctum, and he goes on the speaking tour. He's a successful businessman. And he talks about flow, about getting into a state of flow. And he says the secret, is to be happy in the now and to have a plan for your future, to have goals and dreams for your future, but to be very happy in the now, and you get into a state of flow. And he also meditates every morning. And when you get into a state of flow, then suddenly, in his words, he says, the glass ceiling disappears. And magic seems to happen all around you, and everything seems to fall into place almost magically. How does that happen? Well, we don't know, but you'll never find out unless you're willing to put in the work. And in this case, the work is, 20 minutes of quiet time every morning, setting your goals, having a strong mentality shield, not letting the world influence the way you think about yourself. Those are very simple things to do. They're not easy, but they're very simple things to do. And that changes everything.
So somebody's sitting on the train going to work, and they've rushed to work because they've got to be there at a certain time, and they've got meetings piled up, and they're not happy with their existence. I'm not going to say that they hate their existence, but they're not happy. They're listening to these daily shows because they want to find out how to reclaim their future. Are there some simple things? Are they the 3 steps really that they should focus in on first of all? Are those 3 steps your guide to them to actually say, this is my advice to how you can take action and get the life of your dreams?
Yes, they are. And those are the people who need it the most, because they're in quicksand, and some of them realize it, some of them don't. And the 3 simple steps are designed to be so easy that you can just pick up the book and start it straight away and see amazing benefits the next day. You don't have to invest in anything. You don't have to wear a purple caftan and sit on a pointy rock for 20 years to get the message. You can get it right there and off you go and you start. And, the proof of the pudding is always in the eating. I have thousands of emails from the way people's lives have changed as a result, because I've been teaching these steps for many years, of course, not just with the book. So yeah, that's absolutely. But it's not easy. So you're going to have to get up half an hour earlier than you do already and take that quiet time. You're going to have to do it because your life's at stake. And if your life's at stake, surely you'd be willing to try anything.
So what are the 3 simple steps for somebody out there sitting there thinking, right, I'm going to go and get this book, but I want to know more about it before I hand over my money? What actually are the 3 simple steps?
So the first one is all about mentality control. Mentality being our habitual reaction to outside stimuli. So this is how we immediately react when something happens. So when someone tells you you're crap at your job, we react in a particular way. And so mentality control is about how you can start to be aware of that reaction and then change your reaction. So instead of being against stuff that happens in your life, then you can start to be for stuff that you want. It's a very simple and subtle change. It's like, Mother Teresa once said, when she was asked for her opinion on a particular battle, she said, to the reporter, I'm not against war, I'm for peace. And in that tiny little statement is a wonderful philosophy and a very deep philosophy. And that's what first step is all about. So be for what you want and not against what you don't want. And most people's minds and thoughts are always against what they don't want. They don't want more debt. They want to lose weight, so they don't want to be who they are right now. So they're always thinking about what they don't want. And when you think about what you don't want, I'm afraid the only thing that happens is you get more of what you don't want. So you have to train your mind, train your neural pathways to think in a different way. That's step 1. When you can do that, when you have control, then the next thing I come across is that people say, well, I'd love to start my own company, do my own thing, but I just don't have any great winning ideas. And so step 2 is about how you put yourself in a position to have winning ideas all the time. It's just a little technique that I stole off all the great people from history. And then after you've got those winning ideas, and now you've got mentality control, so no one can talk you out of it, you're actually going to hold on to this and do something with it. Then step 3 is about how you turn that winning idea into a real life experience. And it takes everything that anyone's ever read or heard about goal setting and throws it into what we call in America here now, the trash can. So it just throws it all away, because the way goal setting is taught by the Brian Tracy's and the Tony Robbins of this world is, in my opinion, absolute rubbish.
I get a lot of people on these shows talking about vision boards. Did you believe in vision boards?
I've never had such a thing in my life. I do have a whiteboard on which I write out my intentions for my life. But how I get to the intentions is the whole of step 3. How do you end up with this intention? So you've got to go through a mental program before you can say, okay, this is exactly where I intend to go with my life. And, the one thing that most people are never able to ever answer is, if you stripped away the box that they've put themselves in, and in that box there's some good things and some bad things, you strip it away, suspend it so that nobody gets hurt. You have all the money you'll ever need, all the health you'll ever need, and you'll never hurt anybody in the process. What is it you would do? Most people can't even answer that question. They don't know what they want. And so first of all, you've already got to go backwards in time. You've got to strip away all that you've learned about yourself and all the opinions that you've formed of yourself over the years, and go back to almost that childlike mentality when life was just one great big adventure and everything was possible. You've got to get yourself into that mindset. When you get yourself into that mindset, then you can start to find the true answers as to, what would I really be if there were no impediments? And that's the starting point. If you can't set goals and intentions or anything else, or vision boards or whatever it is, if you don't know the answer to that. So you've got to get there first. And that's really where step 3 takes you. Find out who you really are in your core and what you should be doing, and then how you can go from where you are to where you want to go, without having to hand in your notice and staple a resignation note on your boss's head or something like that.
It is unique self, isn't it?
Everybody is. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, but, I realized when I did this exercise when I was in my early 20s, I was in the Royal Navy and I was doing quite well, and probably a sensible long-term goal, well, short-term goal would have been to get to lieutenant. A long-term goal would have maybe one day, if everything goes well and I get lucky, to be a captain. That was my career path. And then I realized I didn't want any of that when I did this exercise, and all I wanted to be was a writer. And I had to find a way then, because I was already in my 20s and I had a mortgage. So I had to find my way then of, okay, how do I now use this writing in my life so that I can have all the dreams and adventures that I want? And that's how, and so I found a way to do that. The success of my companies is purely down to my abilities as a creative writer. I don't bother with forecasts and budgets and management by objectives and all of that complete corporate nonsense. I draw pictures of the difference we're going to make in people's lives and get people's ownership into a project. That's far more powerful and far more successful than sitting people down and trying to make them make numbers. So that I managed to use that in my life. So I had great travel adventures, great business adventures, and then my own company's adventures, all as a result that I embraced what it is that's in my core, which is writing. That's the one thing I do that time completely disappears when I write, and that's what you have to find.
How do people find that? Because at the moment, I believe, Trevor, I have found my path. I totally believe it. And for years and years and years, I was always the person that was going, you can do this, why can't you do, you've only got one life, and take action and all that kind of stuff. And if you've got a crowd round me, certainly in pubs, I would go into free follow, really. And I could just see people expanding in front of me like, yes, it's possible. And now I'm doing this show. I have to rein that in because I have to remember it's the guest that's the most important part of this show. It's not myself. And I'd be saying the same thing all the time. Come on, guys, you can do it. Listen to Trevor. This is the advice that you want. But I've just found my path kind of by default, I feel. So how do people out there who really desperately are trying to find it and just can't see it, the wood for the trees, is there a trick that they can use? Is it just mindset, or is it just about trying enough things until you finally realize what it is you should be here for?
No, it's none of those. There's a technique that you can use, but it requires stripping away the ego and the sort of environmental opinion of yourself that's been formed by your environment, the people and influences around you. And so it's quite a lengthy technique. It's a couple of chapters of a book. So you have to get away to a place on your own, and you have to understand some neuroscience. 3 Simple Steps is a scientific book, so there's a lot of neuroscience in it that explains why the brain works the way it does and how you can unravel some of that and start with fresh neurons, and how you start all over again like a kid. So you have to go through a process actually, and it's sometimes you have to go through it several times. Most people who write to me say, the first time they went through it, the answer scared them so much they almost ran away from it and went back to their old life. And so you have to go through it time and time again until you finally get it and admit to yourself that this really is who I am, and now I have to take that and use it in some way. So it's a lengthy process. And because a lot of people who want to do this, who want to change their life, they've been living a particular life for 30 or 40 years, and so you can't unravel it in a second. And it's certainly not mindset. And it's about going through a process that unravels all of those layers that you've put around yourself that make you think this is who I am. The psychologists would say there's 3 views of ourselves. There's how we see ourselves, there's how we think other people see us, and there's how other people actually see us. Well, you have to unravel those layers to find out who you really are, and that's a process. It takes quite a while.
Because I feel now, as I'm doing more and more of these shows and getting similar conversations from people, that if we're being honest, we actually sort of know our path, but we're not spending enough time looking back over our life, joining up the dots, and kind of looking for those times, as you say, that you was in flow, when you enjoyed it and you just naturally were good at something. And I think a lot of us chase the money and chase the responsibility and find ourselves climbing up the career ladder because we think that's what should happen. But then when we get to the top, we've either got nowhere to go or we're on the wrong ladder. And if you look back over your life, everyone's got those moments, haven't they, when they go, I really enjoyed that. That was the best thing I ever did. And if you can group those together, then surely that's going to be a career for you.
Yeah, I mean, if career is what you want, yes. I think people have the potential to be much more than a career or much more than a job ladder. You can be and do anything you want. I mean, part of it, Steve Jobs and all the other people that we've mentioned briefly in this program, they all had one unique thing about them too. They all had a sense of purpose. No successful business person that I've ever met, and I include myself in that, and I also include the great, really successful people like Richard Branson. He also says this in some of his lectures. No really successful business person started off trying to be a successful business person or even doing what it is that they thought they loved. Usually people set out angry about something. They want to fix something that's wrong. Okay, like the guy that's built Netflix. Okay, he was angry because he got a $40 late charge from Blockbuster. His anger turned into building Netflix and putting Blockbuster out of business.
I didn't know that.
So most companies are started by Richard Branson has started because he has a student newsletter, and it's for his students who can't even afford the records that he's advertising in his magazine. So he set out to change that, and of course went on to change many other things too. I started my first company because I had a fantastic career in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industry, but I was put off by the fact that we stepped over people with rare diseases because the low number of patients couldn't justify the cost of developing a drug, and the revenues then weren't high enough to be part of a portfolio. We were making decisions based on share price rather than on science. And so I knew there was a better way of doing that. So I started my first company, the world's first and only, I think, a 100% virtual pharmaceutical company, to develop drugs for rare diseases and make them accessible and available to anyone who could benefit from them. Never been done before. Everyone said it was impossible. But such was my anger at the situation, I found ways to solve all that, and it was a very successful company. That's where I think I think there's a big difference between the way people think you become successful and how you actually become successful. You become successful because you got this incredible, powerful motivation, oftentimes caused by either wanting to prove someone wrong or wanting to fix something that you think is wrong.
I think you're speaking about me, and I think you're speaking about everyone out there, really, because it's so fundamentally simple as you say that, isn't it?
It's simple but never easy, because you've got to be honest with yourself. And I do hear from people who say, I want to start my own company. I've tried to work out what I'm really good at, and I turn out to be really good at, let's say, knitting. So I'm starting a knitting company, and I can almost predict that company is going to fail, because there's no source of motivation in that. There's no drive, no purpose. And what I was trying to get to is the Steve Jobs and the Richard Bransons and all those had this incredibly strong sense of purpose. And they didn't set out to be billionaires, okay? They set out to do something. And when you do that, everything else falls into place naturally as a result. So wealth and all of those material benefits come along naturally. You never have to strive for them. You never have to aim for them. I've never set a financial goal in my life. You don't have to, because you've got such a strong sense of purpose that this thing grows and expands. And naturally, when that happens with a company or an idea, wealth and everything else comes along behind it, and you get to enjoy the trappings of success. But I don't think if you ever set out to succeed, I think you'll fail. I think you have to set out to achieve something, and then you'll be able to taste success.
I'd like to see you start a knitting company. I've got that image in my head now, and I like the fact that literally all your references are very British based, aren't they? You really haven't lost the sort of the British element of you.
No, because it's really interesting. The pioneering spirit is alive and well, and never more accessible in America today than it has been. But you know what? I don't see it in Americans that much, because I think their life is quite comfortable, and they don't seem to find that desire, or that as often as I come across immigrants from I meet a lot of Russian immigrants. They just have this real fire in their belly to make something of their lives, and there's nowhere easier in the world than in America, because. Yeah, unlike England or Britain, if I was to stand up in Britain as a poor kid from Liverpool and North Wales and say, you know what, I'd like to be a successful business person, then people would probably laugh at me. And it's that Eddie Izzard thing, come on, son, you're British, tone it down a bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in America. So you can stand up and you can say, I'm going to do this, and people say, good, go do it. And then even if you fail at it, they'll say, well, good on you for trying. It's a very different culture. There's nowhere easier in the world than America to become a pioneer, if you like, of something. I think it's a little more difficult in Britain, and so that's why I tend to seek out British successes, because I gain more from their struggle and their success. I learn more from them perhaps than I do if I pick up an American success story, because they're very common American success stories. There's a lot of them.
And we like the underdog, don't we?
Yes, we do. Well, you're talking to a Liverpool fan. We've been underdogs for quite a few years.
Yeah, I don't know why we do that. I don't know why. But what I want to do, just at the end of the show, before I say farewell to you, this is the last part of the show, and it's a part that we call the Sermon on the Mic. And this is when I play a little theme tune and then step away. And in that moment of the music playing, you get whisked back in time and to have a one-on-one with your younger self. And you can choose any age you want. It could be the little kid running around with scabby knees on the Welsh countryside. It could be anyone you want, but it's going to be yourself. So what kind of advice would you give, Trevor? So I'm going to play the music now. I'm going to be totally quiet, and this is you, the Sermon on the Mic.
Here we go with the best bit of the show, the Sermon on the Mic, the Sermon on the Mic.
Well, for me, it's always an obvious one, and that is that it's never too late, and there's never a bad time to reinvent yourself. I've reinvented myself 5 times.
That is short. That is so short. It really did take me by surprise then. So your advice would be, no matter how old you are, little Trevor, go for it and just see what happens.
Absolutely, go for it right now. There's never a bad time, and it's never too late. I get emails from people who are in their 80s who are starting their own businesses. And I also got emails from a 12-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy who were contemplating suicide, who are now having very successful teenage lives because they've realized that the decisions they were making for the ending of their lives were based upon the world's opinion of them.
Powerful statement to end the show. Trevor, it's been an absolute delight to have you on the show today. You've been open, you've been generous, talkative, and really I could go into episodes 2, 3, 4 with you. As I say to all the guests, please come back in the future, because the beauty of this show is that we're continuing to build our history. We're continuing to develop those dots. And I believe that by joining up the dots and connecting our past, as I said previously, we have the best opportunities to build our futures. Trevor Blake, thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice that every successful entrepreneur practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.